Outdoor Drive Podcast.
All right, welcome back to the Outdoor Drive Podcast. This is your boy East Coast Trev. We are down in the Great American Outdoor Show. I almost even forgot. I think I've done it a million and one times.
It just kind of blurs.
That's right. We got our good buddy, as always, Steve, joining us. And also, we have our other good buddy, Sean Russell. What's up, man? How are you?
Pretty good. How are you guys doing today?
Hanging in.
Yeah.
Like I said, day 3.
Yeah, we've been here 3 days as well. So it's been a long 3 days, but a fun 3 days.
Yeah, that's right. It's always a good time to catch up. I can't believe we were actually just talking to the vice president of the NRA, and he was down here while we were setting up our podcast here before we started podcasting, and he was saying he knew that all of the vendors were coming, but he didn't realize how many people were coming here. And it's really good to get down here and see all these people and shake hands and so on and so forth. So, why don't we kick this thing off? Why don't you introduce yourself, tell everybody who you are, where you're from, and a little bit about what you do.
Well, I'm Sean Russell. I'm 24. I'm from the Eastern Shore of Maryland. Well, actually, I'm from the western side, from Frederick County, but I spend most of my time on the Eastern Shore.
You come from the right side of the state, at least.
Yeah. And, I spend most of my time doing snakeheads and Sika deer.
That's awesome, man. You just guided down in Ohio also, right?
Yeah, for the last 2 seasons, deer seasons, I've been out in Ohio. I'm working for Brushy Fork Outfitters, doing a lot of deer guiding and also turkeys in the spring, and that's been a blast. Been a blast seeing a lot of big deer getting killed out there.
Especially at a young age to have the opportunity to go out and do something like that. I mean, that's got to be a fun thing, and being able to actually go and do it. Yeah,
it's been a great opportunity. It's definitely opened a lot of doors and got to meet a lot of people and opened up a lot of experiences that I wouldn't have been able to have otherwise.
That's good.
Yeah.
What do you think probably was one of your favorite hunts when guiding a client?
Definitely would have had to say back in turkey season, because it's more one-on-one deer hunting. We're doing the scout and we're putting up the stands, putting out the corn, and we're allowed to bait in Ohio. So we put up everything and we just send you to a stand. You sit there. But turkeys, we actually get to call them in, sit with the guys. And one morning we started on Far Ridge, 2 ridges over on the farm, about an 800-acre farm, and birds weren't where we thought they were. Could hear them 2 ridges over, and we ended up making our way over there. Set up 2 times on the way over, thought we were going to be able to call him in, and he just wasn't budging, strutting and gobbling in the hardwoods up on the ridge, and he didn't want to go anywhere. Made our way over there and got set up. Actually crawled into a blind that we had positioned already in the area, used that as cover to sneak in on him. Got in there. I could see the bird, my client couldn't. Bird ended up working off, didn't get a shot. About a half hour later, I ended up calling in 2 more longbeards. And, called him into 10 yards, and he smoked one. Double-bearded, 24 pounds.
Wow.
Yeah.
That's
Nice.
a big bird.
Yeah.
That's a big bird anywhere.
Yeah.
Man, I really want to dive into some of your fishing stuff, because you originated with doing a ton of snakehead fishing, and the world doesn't really know about snakeheads. I mean, I think it's like a little niche area. I mean, they know about them because they were in an aquarium, right? Or they see a couple of bow fishing videos.
Right.
But nobody really knows what a snakehead is, how they act, and what they do, man.
So snakeheads for me, again, I'm younger, and
Right.
snakeheads in Maryland came about around 2000, and I was born in 1997. So when they first came around, I wasn't fishing for them.
Right.
Well, as I got older, I grew up. My dad took me to some farm ponds, did a lot of bass fishing, and I loved bass fishing. Well, I heard about these snakeheads and how they're these alien creatures, and they'll crawl out of water, and they'll eat your dog, eat your pets, eat your kids. Like, they're crazy. So I was like, dude, I want to catch one of them. Like, that's wild. Well, my grandmother, she lives down in Montgomery County, down in Silver Spring area, and there was this pond. I can't remember the name of the pond, but they ended up I used to be catching crazy big crappie in there, great bass fishing, everything, and they drained the whole pond because of a snakehead. And I was like, that's so messed up. Like, because of a fish, they're going to drain the pond. And ever since then, the fishing was terrible in that pond. So I really started trying to catch these fish and started doing some research and realizing the Potomac River was one of the great places where there was a lot of snakeheads, and it was known for them. So started trying there, and honestly, for about 2 years, I couldn't catch one at all. And I ended up going to bow fishing. So I ended up buying a boat and doing a little light setup on it, and we started going out at night, and we found them at night. And that one thing led to the next, and we were able to find them during the day because we found out where they're at during the night, and we started catching them.
Does it change that much night to day?
No, they're in the same places. That's the thing, is what I was doing wrong was fishing. When I first was fishing, I was fishing the wrong places for them. And bass fishing, you might just fish cover in any sense. You might fish shorelines, you might fish deep cover, you might fish shallow cover, you fish all kinds of cover. the snakeheads, same thing. You want to fish cover, but they like the shallow stuff. They like the shallow, the mucky. They actually have to breathe air to survive. So they can live in stagnant water that's not like what a bass would be able to live in. And so they like the same kind of vegetation, the cover. They eat the same lures as a bass would, but they can live in a pond or a puddle. As long as they stay wet, they can survive. And they like that nasty stuff. That's what they thrive in. So, I mean, I'm catching 24, 30, 36-inch fish in a foot and a half of water, a foot of water. You know, even sometimes you'll come up on them and they're 5 inches of water and their tails and their fins are out of the water and they're just cruising through it like a snake. They literally look like a snake coming through the water. When they're 36 inches long, it looks like a huge snake coming through the water, yeah.
That's wild.
Yeah.
So how do you get up in those areas, though?
Kayaks.
Really?
Yep.
Because you can't take a regular bass boat into them areas.
No.
How do these guys do they even attempt to do such a thing?
Well, you know, some guys have the surface drive mud boats and stuff like that, but certain areas you're not allowed to use those. And
Right.
so it depends on the area you're in, but I've found that kayaks are the best way for me to get them. Yeah.
Wow.
And bank fishing, but it's hard to get access. A lot of it's private land access, or it's swampland and you're trying to get away back into there and fish the banks. It's almost impossible. I mean, you have to have chest waders and going through all kinds of swamp and stuff back in there to get to them.
So how do you go about finding these areas?
A lot of it has to do with maps, you know, and you're looking for, again, like I said, they like the shallow, they like the tight creeks, the swampy stuff, and so you're looking at maps and feeder creeks and where creeks come into bigger areas, but you don't want to fish the big bays, so you're looking at the big bays and where the feeder creeks go up into the swamps and into the shallower water.
And then
Stuff
what
like
kind of lure setups are you using?
Anything that a bass will eat, they'll eat. So you can use swim baits, chatter baits, spinner baits, but where I like to fish in the thicker stuff, in the shallow stuff, it's all weedless. Topwater frogs is mainly my go-to. That's kind of what it all started for me too, because for bass, my favorite thing to do is catch them on topwater.
Right.
And now you're looking at a creature that has teeth that is 2-3 times bigger than your average bass. They can get up to 15, 20 pounds. The Maryland state record right now for a northern snakehead is 19.9 pounds. That was with a bow. Rod and reel is probably 17, I believe, something around there.
They don't separate the two?
Yeah, bow and rod and reel is a different category.
Okay.
So for bow fishing, the record is 19.9. For rod and reel, I believe it's around 17.
Wow.
Don't quote me on that.
That's still
one.
crazy for a freshwater fish.
Yeah. My biggest with the bow is 17.7.
Wow.
Yeah.
That's an absolute giant.
Yeah.
It's so when it comes to like line and stuff like that, do you have to use anything special, or are you?
Yeah, so they're not line shy. You don't have
Okay.
to worry about using like a clear leader or nothing like that. I mean, I use 50-pound braid, 50 to 80-pound braid.
Really?
Yeah, and I'm using heavy rods, you know, like a heavy action bait caster, something heavy. You can use spinning rods. Some guys do, but I prefer a bait caster.
Right.
And I prefer using heavy line and ripping them out of that cover.
So you don't have to use a fluorocarbon leader or nothing like that. You're
No, they're
just
not
straight
line
braid.
shy.
and-
Yeah, I just straight braid. And you don't have to worry about a metal leader either. Like, they do have teeth, but they're not going to cut you off.
You're not
if you
gonna
use
need
heavy braid. And you might have to retie every couple fish or so maybe, but
You know,
have to
that's
watch your
no
line.
different than hitting
Yeah.
a big fish
Right,
anywhere.
Right.
But you don't have to worry about anything special.
No.
I just tie 80-pound or 50-pound braid right to my frog. You know?
What kind of rod are you using?
I use all kinds of rods. I'm honestly not picky at all.
I didn't know
Yeah.
if you were like, no, I got to do it on light tackle or
No,
medium
no.
tackle
I like heavy. I like heavy.
Okay.
I like heavy rods. I like a heavy action bait caster. Even medium heavy's all right, but I like heavy, and I like to rip them out of there.
Because you're ripping them out of the weeds.
Yeah, I mean, I might be throwing a frog over top of logs because they're in the swamp, back in the thick stuff. You might throw it way back in the cattails or way back in the logs and stuff, and you might even get hung up. So I mean, you're trying to rip them out of there a lot of times.
As fast as you
Yeah,
can.
yeah. You don't want them to get underneath the stuff either.
Is very aggressive hit.
Oh yeah, yeah. That's another thing about them is, especially on a topwater, it's like a cannonball explosion when they hit it.
So it's like a peacock bass, more or less, in the fresh water.
Yeah. I mean, yeah, definitely. And you bring that up. Actually, I was down in Florida this past spring and catching peacocks and bullseye snakeheads.
So what's the difference between a bullseye and, what is it, an eastern snakehead?
Well,
What do they call
northern
it?
snakehead.
Northern
Yep,
snakehead,
so we have
okay.
the northern snakeheads are in Maryland, and then down in South Florida, and they have the bullseye snakeheads. They definitely look a little different. The bullseye snakeheads are more slender. The northern snakeheads get a little fatter, a little more heavy. But the one thing about the way you fish them, the northern snakeheads like a slow presentation.
Okay.
9 times out of 10. Sometimes they'll hit a little faster, but a lot of times you might pause your frog 10, 15, 20, even 30 seconds and just waiting, and they'll follow behind it. You'll see them, and they'll just be watching your frog as they come along, but they just won't hit it. And I don't know what it is, but they really like to observe the bait before they commit. Not always. Sometimes they'll hit it fast, but if they're not hungry, if they're not in an aggressive state, they'll follow it. They'll eventually probably hit it, but they like to go slow. The bullseye snakeheads are like a freight train.
Really?
They like it fast, yeah. You want to do that thing as fast as you can across top of the water. Buzz baits work great for them, or like a ribbit frog with the paddle tails, and you just rip it across the top of the water as fast as you can. And they'll come up out of nowhere, and you just keep ripping it fast because they'll come up like a freight train and hammer that shit.
Wow. Nice.
Yeah, and they definitely fight harder than the northerns, I think, yeah. I caught a 13-pound bullseye, which was about 37 inches, which is a 37-inch. Northern would probably be about 15 to 17 pounds, you know,
Yep.
or maybe even heavier depending on eggs or whatnot. But bullseyes are a little less, so it's probably about a 13-pound bullseye, about 37 inches. That fish fought way harder than any northern I've ever caught. Yeah.
That's nuts. And are you fishing the same type of water?
Yeah. Yep. Shallow.
They're up in that shallow,
nasty,
muddy,
mucky canals. Yeah, and especially in South Florida, you know, you're just going around fishing any canal you can find.
Any little mud hole.
Yeah, like there's water everywhere down there, and you just go find a canal on the side of the road and grab your rod and grab a couple lures and go throw the line a couple times.
But they have a couple of different other invasive fish down there also, not just the snakehead.
Yeah, well, the peacock bass are a blast. If you like smallmouth fishing, the peacock is like a smallmouth times 3.
I'm in.
Yeah,
Exactly right. Yeah, you know
That's
it.
my
because-
jam.
Yeah.
That was always my favorite thing in Maryland on the western side, fishing creeks growing up, was smallmouth. And so when I went down there catching those, they're beautiful, as a smallmouth is, just in a different way. And the way they hit is very aggressive too. They love a jerkbait and they just swipe it. You'll get a pack of them come up, like 10 of them, and they're just fighting to get that bait, and they crush it, and they just start ripping drag, jumping out of the water. Everything a smallmouth has times 3.
I think we need to add that to our Florida trip.
I know, man. That's what I'm saying. They have the knife fish down, the clown knife.
Yeah,
I mean, there's a pile of.
I didn't get to catch one of those. We tried, but from shore they're pretty hard to get on.
Okay.
I got a guy that, you know, if he had his boat running when I was down there, the boat wasn't running, but he gets on them a lot on his boat.
And what are the plankos?
Yep, the plecos. Now I didn't catch any of them, but we shot them with the bows.
Yep.
Yeah, and some blowgun action too. But they have also, what's really cool is the Oscars.
Okay.
Yeah, the Oscars.
Like the pet aquarium
like people
Oscars.
have in their fish
Yeah.
tank. So I was in the Everglades one morning trying to do some turkey hunting, and I had my rod in the back, and there's this canal, and I could see all these fish popping everywhere. So I started throwing some different stuff, and couldn't get anything to hit. I found this little, probably inch-long crankbait. Started throwing it in the ditch, and boom, this thing hits and starts. I mean, for being a pretty small fish, you know, probably only, I didn't weigh it, maybe a pound, probably only 16 inches long, a big for an Oscar, you know.
Right.
And it was pulling good, and it was a blast. And not only that, but they tasted amazing.
Oh, you ate the thing?
Yeah, dude. Yeah, I caught like, I was by myself, but I caught, I think 6 or 7 of them. And they're invasives, you know, you can keep as many.
Did you know that they were good eating, or somebody had told you, or you just kind of went on a whim?
You know, I don't know if at that time I'd really know. I guess I'd seen videos on YouTube before, you know, and I made a video with Blue Gabe before, and I had seen his videos, and he had done the same thing, he'd eaten them before, and I think I looked it up or something like that. But it's just like a panfish, but they were delicious.
Wow.
Yeah.
And that's one of the things a lot of people talk about with the invasive fish, on how they're not edible, or, you know, like carp or whatever. But people don't realize that snakehead, going back to snakehead's one of the best eaten fish that there is.
Delicious.
So what kind of consistency is a snakehead, and what would you make out of it? Like, what's your favorite dish?
Well, I think a favorite dish is very hard because you can cook it any way you want and it's good. The thing I can compare it the best to would be a rockfish. You know, a lot of people know what a rockfish tastes like, especially from anywhere on the eastern side. So it's very comparable to that. It's a very meaty fish. It's flaky, but it's a very meaty texture, and it's very mild. No fishy taste at all.
I kind of relate it to the walleye.
Yeah.
That would be like the same consistency, that flakiness of it. It looks and tastes like a walleye.
Yeah.
It's probably in the top tier of good freshwater eaten fish.
Yeah, but when you say like a favorite dish, that's hard because I made everything. You know, tacos, just grilled it, put it in a pan, just seared it, fried it. You know, I've even made fried rice, cut it up into small little chunks and put it in fried rice, and that's even amazing. I mean, any way you want to cook it, it's great.
I couldn't believe it when I went down and visited in Maryland that all the restaurants have specials for snakehead. That's like a huge thing, the commercial fishing down there for the snakehead. I was blown away.
Yep. Yeah, it's awesome. I mean, and it's a blast. Like I said, rod and reel standpoint, for an angler who is a sport fisher, it's like a largemouth bass on steroids, and you can't get much better than that, you know. It's going to hit, like I said, the same lures, same type of stuff, but I prefer the top water. And what kind of got me all into it and got me all into guiding, there was a tournament down on the Eastern Shore it was through Blackwater Edge, which is the refuge we fish down in the Eastern Shore. And they were having a tournament, and I was like, you know, I'm free this weekend. I'll go down there and try to fish. And I knew about this creek that was pretty good, and you know, kayak or shore-based fishing, whatever you want to do. And I went out in this creek, and I mean, dude, it was insane. So one of the things about snakeheads is when they have their young, they protect them.
Right.
So it's called a fry ball.
Okay.
And both parents will protect them. So the mom will circle close and keep them tight, and she'll push them to the surface so that they can learn how to breathe air.
Gotcha.
Because again, a snakehead has to breathe air to survive. So then the father will circle farther out and protect from a farther distance. And anything that comes inside of that zone, they're gonna kill it. So, and I mean, I've seen them eat muskrats off the top of the water. I've seen them eat ducks. I've seen them eat, like I said, anything that goes across top of the water. If it goes through their little territorial area, when they have babies, it's killed. So if you can get into an area and you find some of these fry balls, you throw anything inside of there and you're going to get them. Yeah. Sometimes these fish do get smart, and once they start getting fished in certain areas, because there's a lot of pressure. A lot of guys fish for them. A lot of guys do catch and release. A lot of guys keep them. You don't have to kill them anymore. Originally in Maryland, it was like you had to kill them. Now over the years, they've realized that they're established. They're not going anywhere. And if you would,
you're not going to be able to get rid of them.
Right. You're allowed to release them, but you just cannot transport them. If you have one in your boat, in your possession, you have to kill it. But if you're going to catch it, take some pictures, you can release it right away, and that's okay. But anyway, these fish, they'll get pressured, and sometimes they'll get shy. It might take 15, 20 casts to catch them on a fry ball, but they're going to hit. And a lot of times you can get both of them as well. So I went up in this creek, and I couldn't believe it. I mean, I'm probably 5 miles, 6 miles from where I put in, up in this creek, way back in the swamp. And everywhere I looked, there's fry balls around. You know, like literally everywhere you look. I could count 12 fry balls within 50 yards of me. You think 12 fry balls, that's going to have 2 parents on each one.
That's 24 fish.
Right. So, I mean, just you better get ready to make every opportunity count.
Right.
And I lucked out that all these fish ended up being really big. I think the smallest fish I caught was 8 pounds. The largest was 12. So it was a 5-fish limit, and it was a 2-day tournament, so you keep 5 fish each day. And that day I was able to fill my kayak with fish, and I started going back across the bay, and I didn't realize how much fish I had in my kayak. I ended up almost sinking my kayak, so I pull over to the shore. I start having to call out fish. I threw back 7 fish over 8 pounds.
Jeez.
Yeah.
And you still won the tournament.
Yeah. That day, I don't know what my weight was that day, but within the 2 days, I had 75 pounds.
And what was the
snakeheads.
second place guy?
It was like 40 something.
Jeez.
Yeah.
So it's like bed fishing more or less, because when you put that lure in that area.
Sure. Yeah. That when they have the fry balls, it is like bed fishing. You know, it's just like a bass. Again, as long as you are consistent and persistent and you keep on them, you're going to get them to bite. It might take 20, 30, 40 casts, but you're going to get them.
They're going to get them.
They're going to protect their babies, and you're going to get them. So,
is there a certain time that they're in there spawning, or do they spawn a couple times a year? I know that being the way that they are, I could only imagine.
Yeah, they do. They actually do spawn. They can spawn multiple times a year. Their first spawn is normally in June, July. And then after that, they can spawn again early September and even into October. Normally it'll be twice. Like the younger ones will spawn later, the bigger ones will spawn first. And they can have anywhere from 10 to 80,000 babies at a time. I mean, it's crazy. I've seen fry balls that are like the size of the hood of a truck.
Come on.
Yeah. I don't know this for sure, but I think sometimes when you're fishing for them too, and these guys are keeping them, when you take the parents off of a fry ball, the fry ball is now by themselves, and they're vulnerable to any kind of predator. You know, now once you take the parents away, those are little snacks for everything: bass, bluegills, crappie, all that stuff. But I think that they will pair up with another fry ball, and then the parents don't know any better. They just guard all of them. So you'll sometimes see these fry balls that are gigantic that I don't believe it could come from one fish, but I guess you never know. I don't know.
That's nuts, man. I can't get over and how they've sustained in that water, and you don't see them very. I mean, Eastern Shore is like its own little jungle. It has its own fish population, and it has. I mean,
the cool thing is, so you have the Eastern Shore, but you also have like the Potomac comes up into the western side, and they've spread up that way as well, and that's where they most originated, was the Potomac.
Okay.
So it's kind of two different fisheries. Like the Potomac River is all tidal based. You can catch them any time of day, but I've realized when it comes to the really tide-based areas like the Potomac, it's all on a falling tide. Because, on a rising tide, they're going to be way up in the thick stuff.
They're in the frag grass and
whatever, and that's where all the bait is. Well, when it falls, they'll sit on that line, and all the bait's getting sucked out of the grasses, and they'll sit there and they'll wait and they'll feed. So as the tide rises, they go up in this thick stuff. As the tide falls, they come out. That's when the fishing's better in a tide-based area. Now, the Eastern Shore, where you're in the swamps, like you said, that's like its own place. It's like a jungle. There's spots where you can catch them any tide. Rising tide, falling tide, slack tide. Now, there's, like I said, there's some areas that are better for other times, and some areas that are better for falling, rising, whatever, but you can catch them all the time in the swamp.
Is that the same on the bow fishing side?
Yeah, I mean, the only thing with bow fishing is obviously it just changes where you're going to look for them. When the tide rises and if they're all up in the thick stuff and you can't drive your boat up in there, you can't see anything, you're not going to be able to shoot them. So it's obviously normally better on a falling tide. But again, there's certain areas, like if you can find a cove that's shallow and like a shallow, muddy cove, when the tide rises up in there, if it's only 2 foot of water, they'll all be sitting on that cove in the flat, and you can shoot them off that. It just depends on the area you're in. Some areas are better for rising, better for falling, but typically your falling tide is better.
I couldn't also believe, speaking about it being a jungle, is all the dang goldfish. They are everywhere.
Yeah. And it's not legal to use them as bait, but I guess it's from people, going out and buying them from the pet store and using feeder goldfish as bait for other stuff, and they just throw a couple back in the water at the end of the day, and it's crazy. You'll get into them. They spawn on the river, in the coves and everything. You'll get in them in the thousands, and they can be 2, 3, 4, 5 pounds.
And you can't really catch them rod and reel.
Not that I know of. I mean, I guess some carp guys accidentally catch them.
Like bread fishing or something like that.
Maybe some worms or something.
Yeah.
But
they have to be shot.
Yeah, we shoot the shit out of them. Yeah.
And you got to keep them controlled.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. There's tons of them. Everything. The carp, the
and they're not small neither.
Yeah.
They're big.
5 pounds.
Big goldfish.
I don't know what the record is. It's probably right around 4 or 5 pounds, but probably close to 20-inch fish. Yeah.
That's nuts. Yeah. A goldfish.
Yeah, a goldfish.
All I can think about when I had seen him, I'm like, all right, it's a bunch of aquarium people dumping them into the
I thought
septic
my fish was dead.
Yeah, exactly. They put it, or they put it in their toilet. They flush it down the toilet, and all I see is this cesspool going into the Chesapeake Bay, and then that's how they get the goldfish.
Could have happened.
That's all I could think about when I saw it. I was like, you got to be kidding me.
Yeah, how many school projects are now tearing up the whole waterway?
Or all the fairs. All the fair, because the kids win them at a fair, and where do they put them? The parents just dump them off the side of a bridge. Yeah, exactly.
The snakeheads love them though. They
really?
Yeah. Oh yeah, they'll eat them. Yeah.
So they make like goldfish lures for these snakeheads?
Yeah, I mean they should. I guess they don't. I've never seen them.
Wait, I'm gonna retract that. Go ahead and patent that.
Yeah, right. No doubt.
It's already patented. No, don't worry about it, guys. It's already patented.
One of my favorite frogs is a blaze orange frog, and one of the reasons I like that is it's just a little different than what everyone else is throwing. And like I said, sometimes on the Eastern Shore it's been getting big, and a lot of guys are fishing for them now. And with the pressure that comes with that, sometimes you got to do something different and bring something a little different to the game. Mm-hmm. And I've even gone to a fry ball per se, and I've broken off 80 pound like on the hook set. Like I'm not gentle on a hook set. I've snapped off my frog with 80-pound braid or just on a hook set before. And when you're dealing with a 10-pound fish that's coming up and blowing up on that frog, I've broken off on them, and I've gone back and caught those same fish with a different color frog later. That day.
They're that aggressive.
Yeah, or even like one of them, the one that I can't forget, that I was in a tournament, threw into this fry ball, and I saw the fin came up on the frog, looking at it and everything, and it was a big snakehead, and I was like, I need this one for the tournament. Sure enough, I throw in there, it grabs onto it, I set the hook, and it spits the frog. I'm like, oh man, I thought I missed my opportunity.
Right.
So I throw back in there with that frog, and it ignored it. Well, I pull it back in, cut off that frog, tie on another frog, throw it back in there. Second cast smokes it. Just the different color just made a little difference.
Do they like those vibrant colors though? Are
Yeah.
they like chartreuse and orange and pink and stuff like that?
Yeah. But some days I've also noticed that they like the natural colors, you know,
Right.
and frogs that look more realistic. I use a lot of frogs that look like a brown, like a toad, too. Yeah.
Maybe sun-wise, you think that the clarity, water, maybe make a difference?
It definitely can. You know, like the Potomac River, a lot of times that's a really clear fishery. The Eastern Shore, it's always muddy, murky, swampy. You're never really getting clear water there. So, I mean, I've definitely realized there, and it's weird. They, like I said, they'll definitely observe the bait, and the colors made a difference. Now, when it's clear water, I've seen it both ways. I don't know if it's, like I said, light, whatever it is, but also pressure and just what they've seen and how much they've seen. Like I said, I like using frogs that are different, out of the ordinary, what other guys might not be using. You know?
Now, I want to dive in, especially I talk about it being the jungle, because it's like actually more like a rainforest, I guess, is the Eastern Shore, because there's something else that's down there that a lot of people don't maybe not know of, maybe do know of, but it's another very hard hunted thing, which is the Sika deer. Yeah. And that's something that you've kind of put a lot of energy and time and forth to try and get after and kill, and you do very well at that.
Yeah, sadly, you know, the last 2 seasons I haven't been around them much, but that all started, I guess, you know, I grew up hunting, and hunting was a huge thing for me, and whitetail hunting, and used to hunt every day after school. Well, on the western side of Maryland where I'm at, to kill a 150 class buck or something like that, you're doing pretty well. And I had killed some nice bucks and was shooting quite a bit of deer, and I wanted something different, just a different challenge. And I heard about Sika deer, and me and my buddy were like, you know, let's go try it out. So we'd never been down before, and nobody ever took us out. And the first time we ever went in Maryland has a early muzzleloader. It's in October, and the Sika deer, their rut is in October, so it kind of falls perfect that you get a 3-day gun season during the prime of their rut. Some guys don't like it because they're like, they're getting shot at, and the bow hunters and everything, which I'm on that page, but at the same time, it's a great way to have a good chance at getting a good stag or a deer in general. So me and my buddy go out to public land, and we're sitting there. Sure enough, this hind, a Sika deer, a doe, which they call them hinds, comes by, and we shoot her with the muzzleloader. And I was always told how strong these deer were, and you know, 50-pound, 60-pound deer, dude, you know, how's that thing going to be crazy strong? Well, anyway, I'm using a muzzleloader. I shoot this thing at 8 yards. Thought I made a great shot. Don't really know. Runs off into the swamp. Me and my buddy are freaking out. We don't know what to do. It's the first time ever down there. Everybody says you can't track them. They're in the water. You know, you just have to go to the last spot you saw them and hope you can find them. So it run off in the swamp. We go to the last spot we saw it, and we can't find anything. We can't find the deer. We can't find blood. We can't find anything. So we're like, dude, let's just go back to where we shot it. You know, let's do what we do. Let's try to track blood. We found some blood, and it was going through the needle grass in the water, and we saw some blood on the grass, and we start tracking. We figured what trail it went down, found where it was going. Luckily, this was in needle grass, which is only about knee to waist high. If frag grass, phragmitis, which we call frag grass, will get 10, 12. That gets crazy high, and that's like the jungle stuff. But that's what the deer came out of, and it was going into the needle grass. And so we're going along tracking. This is probably an hour after I shot it with the muzzleloader. And my buddy goes to step, and the deer jumps up out of the water, just like it's just laying there in the marsh. Jumps up and runs, and I didn't have my gun, he had his, and it was loaded. And he pulls up on it, and the deer's standing there about 15 yards from us. And I was like, no, like, don't shoot it again. Let's see what it does. And it's just standing there, and it lays back down. And all you can see is its ears sticking up out of the grass.
Right.
It's so small, you can't even.
They're tiny.
Yeah, and it's in the brush and everything, so we can't get a shot at it. So we make a big circle around and come in from a different angle where we can see it better. And I told my buddy, I was like, look, if it moves again, just shoot it. And we're walking up, creeping up, and the deer stands up again. This is easily 2 hours now after I shot this deer. And I thought I made a good shot. And deer stands up again. He shoots, hits it, and it still runs. And it goes about 10 more yards, falls over. Well, I got the deer's hide tan because the entrance holes were about 5 or 6 inches apart. My entrance hole was about 5 or 6 inches behind the shoulder and exited right behind the shoulder. It was a little bit quartering away, so it was a good shot. I mean, should have been lungs.
Perfect.
Lungs and heart. And then my buddy's shot went right through both shoulders. Our entrances were about 6 inches apart. Exit holes are touching. Like there's only one exit hole in the deer.
Wow.
Yeah, it's
What
crazy.
are the chances of
right,
that?
Right, like it's literally like 2 little round dots touching each other on the exit. So
That's wild.
I got the deer open, and the heart was butterflied from both bullets, and the deer had survived 2 hours.
That's nuts.
Yeah.
That's how strong these things are.
Yeah, and this was only a 50-pound hind. You know, this wasn't even like a big stag. You know, so yeah, they're crazy. It's an experience. It's like turkey hunting. It's like deer hunting. I haven't been out west and elk hunting yet, but it really makes me want to elk hunt because to me it's a miniature elk. Yeah. They bugle. It's more of a whistle. It's a high pitched bugle. They bugle like elk. They mew like elk. They have harems like elk do, and they're just like an elk. Most of my hunting for them is based around calling. That day we were just sitting, but ever since then I learned how to use calls for them, and we use elk calls for them.
Are they that curious of an animal?
Yeah, and I think it has a lot to do with the terrain. Like you said, it's like a jungle, and when you get into that 12-foot tall frag grass, all you see is these little tiny Sika deer trails that are barely as wide as me. I'm 140 pound, 5'10". I'm not very big, and I can barely fit down a lot of these trails down through the marsh. So like, they can't see anything. The only way to find each other is to talk to each other.
Sound.
You know, so they use sounds. They're very vocal. You know, the stags, they growl, they bugle, the hinds mew, and yeah, they're awesome.
So is there one thing, I don't want to give away too many secrets because there is a lot of pressure down on these animals, but is there something that you look for naturally to try and move in on some of these deer?
Yeah. I mean, definitely transitions. Like I said, they like the swamp. So like, just saying, a lot of these guys, they try to go down there, they're hunting in the high ground. You're probably not going to kill one most of the time on dry ground. You got to get a little bit wet most of the time. There's exceptions, and especially during the rut, the hinds don't like being chased around in the water. So the stags, when they start chasing, the hinds will go onto high ground to get away from them. But for the most part, you got to get into the swamps and everything like that, and look for the most fresh sign you can find. Look for fresh browsing, fresh poop, you know, any kind of fresh tracks, fresh sign, trails that have a lot of fresh mud kicked up on the edges of them. Again, anything that's fresh, because you're going to see a lot of trails. There's trails everywhere, and that's the hardest part, is you can set up on trails all day long and just wait, but you don't know what trail they're going to come down.
Because there's a million of them.
Right. So that's why I'll go in and I might set up on a big transition where there's 10 trails, and then that's when my calling comes into play. But you got to be good at calling too, because there's a lot of guys out there when you're sitting there during the rut, just like blowing. It sounds like they're blowing kazoos and whistles and stuff out there. Come on, man. Yeah. It's like calling is a good tactic, but you can't be out there blowing a call all day, and you got to be able to blow your call properly. You know.
What are some of the calls that you say blow them? Are you using mouth reeds? Is there something that's? Well, I don't want to give away your secrets because I know it's very.
I can't tell my call that I really use, but like they have a couple of calls, like the Sika.
There is actual Sika deer.
Yeah, there's a Sika seducer. There's a Sika reel, which that's like a little, I guess it's like a little square box. You push them together. It's like any of the
real calls. Yeah, I know real calls.
It's a
they make a turkey call. They make a
exactly.
So they do make a Sika deer one.
They make a Sika one. I like it. I like that one better for close quarters because it's a little quieter. Mm-hmm. You can't really get a great bugle out of it. You can get a quiet bugle out of it, but you can get some good mews, and especially when they're in close, I've even used that to you can put that in your mouth and you can stop them when they're coming through a shooting lane or something. Mm-hmm. So that's a good call for that. The Sika seducer is good. That's not my favorite call because it's a little bit loud. It's a very loud call, and it takes a little more practice to get really good at it.
Are they that loud? Like you can hear them from a ways away?
You can hear them from a long ways away.
Yeah, they are. They're very loud.
It could be across the entire swamp bottom, looking over into the next pine ridge, and it's going to sound like it's on you. What really gave them away to me is when you start hearing them splashing. That's how you're judging your distance. Okay, he's closer.
Yeah, and the growls, you can't hear a growl farther than 60 yards. Yeah. If you hear them growling, they're within 60 yards.
So you know then it's time.
Yeah, and dude, the first time I heard one growl, I thought it was some demon creature. I was sitting with my buddy that took me out, and it starts growling. I'm like, dude, what is that? I didn't think it was the deer. And he's like, dude, that's a stag. And he's close, because like I said, you can't hear that noise from far away. When they bugle, during the rut, if it's good, you'll hear bugles everywhere. All day.
Can you decipher the difference between the people in their kazoos and these actual
Oh yeah, definitely. You can definitely tell the difference.
Are they trying to do a lot of bugling or?
Yeah, I mean it works, but the thing about the bugling too, you gotta be in their zone. Like they'll bugle just to bugle. You know, when they wake up in the morning or when they get up out of their bed in the afternoons, they bugle. When they go to bed down in the mornings, they bugle. You know, so they bugle to communicate and to show each other where they're at. Now, if you find where a stag is and you're in his little range and you challenge him with a bugle, it can work.
So it's like an elk.
Yeah.
More or less.
Yeah.
You got to get in his area.
Yeah, and the biggest stag that I ever shot, I lost in the swamp. And that's the thing about Sika deer. You know, I've told a lot of people, I could guarantee pretty much anybody a shot at a Sika deer. But the problem is finding them in the swamp. You know, once you make that shot, tracking them, finding them, they could fall down in the water that's waist deep, and they're going to be underwater. You know, you'll never.
Oh, you don't even see them.
Yeah, you have to trip over it to find it. You know, and there's no tracking through the water. I mean, the only thing you can track is muddy trails and stuff like that. But you know, we've used hydrogen peroxide. That's one little trick that people can use to find deer. The blood on top of the water, use hydrogen peroxide and you spray it on top, and the blood will bubble. You can see that sometimes. That helps, but. So I was hunting this one spot, and my buddy that was down there, lives down there, was like, he knew where this one stag was living, so he told me to go in there. I had the access with my kayak, paddled in 2 miles, get back in there, and in the morning, he ends up running by at about 7:30 with a hind. It sounded like elephants coming through, man, and he chases this hind through, and when he went through my opening at like about 65 yards, I saw him. I bugled at him to kind of challenge him, you know. I was like, well, maybe he'll come over, but he was with his hind. He looked over my way, ignored it, and kept running. Well, that was about 7:30 in the morning, so every half hour after that, I would let out a bugle. And their bugles, it's normally a sequence of 3 whistles. So every half hour, I'd let out 3 whistles. And about 11 o'clock, the wind started to pick up, so I was like, you know what, I'm going to get down and move a little closer to where he had went through the first time. Maybe he'll come back through that area again. Well, we're sitting there, or I'm sitting there, leaned up against a tree, looking around. I was using my saddle with wild edge steps, so I had my wild edge steps over my shoulder. My bow was on my bag, and I was just intended to go over, climb up another tree, and set back up. Well, as I'm standing there, I look up the creek, and all I see is a rack coming my way, like looking down the creek towards me. I'm like,
yeah, and they come out of nowhere.
Yeah, and again, it's like a jungle in there, so it's really thick. So as soon as I see that, I'm already like in the thick stuff. So I drop down to the ground, and the first thing goes through my head is he's coming back in to me bugling. You know, finally his hind left him. He had come by at 7:30 that morning. It's about 11:30 now. The hind probably left him, and he's coming back to see who the hell was in his area bugling. And so I was like, you know, do I just try to hide, let him wander off and try to climb up a tree and hunt the rest of the day, or do I try to call him in? And I was like, he's coming looking for me, and I'm gonna try to call him in.
He's on the search.
Right. So I grab my bow off, I take my bag off, grab the bow off, knock an arrow, peek over the grass, and he's still there looking around. I rip a bugle, and all I hear is thrashing. I'm like, well, he's either scared, running away, or he's coming right at me. And the only thing separating us was a creek. He was on the other side of the creek, and it was about a 5-yard creek. Well, I look over the grass again, and he's charging right down the edge, coming right to me. And I'm like, this couldn't be any more perfect. Well, he's coming down, he hits this tall patch of frag, and when he hits that frag, he slows down, and it's really thick. All I can see is his horns coming through. And when he was going to step out of that frag, he was going to be 15 yards, perfect broadside, right in front of me. I draw back before he comes out of the frag. He steps out. I stop him, let the arrow fly, and I saw that the arrow was stuck in him. I knew I hit him right around his shoulder area. I didn't know if I hit him in the shoulder, thought I hit him right behind the shoulder. I kind of figured I hit the back shoulder and it stopped the arrow. Well, I was using mechanicals. So I was using Rages at the time. And, yeah.
Enough said.
Yeah. You learned your lesson very quickly, it sounds like.
Yeah.
Sorry.
The problem is I can't really talk too much trash about Rage because in Maryland, this is a little backstory, but like growing up, I'm allowed unlimited does with a bow. I've only ever shot mechanicals. I shot 24 deer with my bow one year. My junior year of high school, my senior year of high school, I shot 37. Every one of those deer was with Rage Broadheads.
Right.
Like,
I'm not dead down talking it.
But I don't use Rages anymore.
No.
After this experience, I don't use Rage anymore. So anyway, I shot this deer, and I see blood spewing on impact, and he wheels off, runs off in the frag, and I see the frag thrashing about 70, 80 yards down. I thought he was done there. So I call my buddy up that had told me to hunt that spot to begin with, and he's like, yeah, I'm coming, don't worry. So by the time he got there on his kayak and everything, it had been about 2 hours, and again, I thought I smoked this deer. So we get over there, we start tracking, and there's blood everywhere. And my buddy that I was with, he's killed a lot of big Sika deer, and he was like, dude, you smoked this thing, he ain't going far. So we start tracking, and where I saw the frag thrash, where about 70 yards, we found my arrow broke, and only about 5 inches of the arrow, maybe 6, and the broadhead was gone. Well, we kept tracking, there's blood everywhere, whatever, and we ended up jumping the deer up about 150 yards down the trail, waited another 2 hours, started tracking again, got on him, went through the marsh, lost him, got on him again. We ended up tracking about 400 yards and finally lost him in the water. And the next day, I went back and searched, couldn't find anything. The next day, I went back, and there was 2 eagles circling and a couple buzzards. And
Air Force called me in.
Yeah, but the thing was, the muzzleloader season was coming up, because what I had done, I took off a week to hunt, and I was going to hunt bow and then the 3-day muzzleloader in October. And I didn't have the permit to be in that zone for the muzzleloader, so I couldn't go back and look.
Right.
So I was never able to find him. But the thing was, I'm sure the deer did die. Like, it was crazy blood trail. There was definitely birds circling the area and everything. But we couldn't get a dog in there, unfortunately. But the thing was that, like I said, turned me off the rage was that I only got 5-6 inches of penetration at 15 yards.
Yeah.
With 60 pounds. It should have been a lot more penetration.
Catastrophic failure.
Yeah, and I'm not saying that I didn't make a less than ideal shot. I mean, I definitely think I hit an inch or two farther forward than I wanted, but that's the thing, is with a marginal shot, it should have.
It's something that I always touch on all the time, is it's that what if factor.
Yep.
That what if factor. You had that what if factor.
Yep.
And if it didn't happen, it would have been a kill. It would have been perfect. You would have never had a problem, but you had that what if factor. So then that's what puts you in that realm of having a problem with it.
Yeah. And I right now in my quiver, I have mechanicals and fixed blades, but I don't shoot rages anymore.
And there's nothing wrong with them.
Right.
There's really not. I killed a ton of deer with them. I used to be a die-hard rage guy. I'm not going to lie to you. I use hypodermics. I've used them all from start to finish. I loved them. I killed a ton of deer with them. I, like yourself, had a what-if scenario. And then I said, well, what if this happens again? I don't want
something massive.
Right, and I don't want this problem.
And that's the thing, is it happened on something massive. Like, this was a big Sika stag. Like, I haven't had another shot at a deer that big, and this was 3 years ago. Mm-hmm. I mean, I've seen them that big again, but I haven't had another shot at one that big. And, so it's unfortunate. But
so if you could tell, the listeners out there, one good tip to put themselves in a scenario where they could kill a decent stag, what would it be?
Do some scouting, and definitely scouting. Try to find freshest sign you can find, and if you can learn how to blow a call beforehand, like I said, calling definitely works, but you've got to be able to blow the call pretty decent and sound halfway realistic. But calling definitely works really well, and find the freshest sign that you can find. There's gonna be, like I said, a lot of trails that are old and not used,
right?
And it's hard to distinguish the fresh sign from the old sign when you're in the marsh, where a trail in the mud in the marsh where there's water, it'll hold a track for a while, and you can't distinguish how old that track is sometimes. So like I said, it's more, you got to pay attention to the fresh mud on the grass, or like the fresh browsing on the stuff around you, and you got to distinguish what's fresh and what's old. But get yourself in the most fresh sign you can, and learn how to blow a call a little bit, but don't get too crazy with it, and make sure you're halfway decent with it.
It's just trial and error, just like everything else. And the pressure down there is tough.
Yeah, the pressure is definitely tough. And another thing is, you got to get back in there. Not all the time. Some guys are like, oh, you got to get way back in there. And that's one thing I've also realized, is sometimes everybody's trying to get so far back in there.
I have seen more stags right off the side of the road driving through there. It drives you crazy. Everyone gets excited. He jumped the road here and he was headed this way. No, he went right there and stopped.
Yeah, it's a jungle. I mean, they could be 5 yards off the road and you can't see them. You can be 100 yards from one and
you'll never know.
First, you can be 5 yards from one and not see them. I've called them in before, and they'll come. I'm hunting trails where the only way you're even going to get a shot or see the deer is if it comes out on the
On the
select
trail.
couple trails that are in front of you. You can have it walk by you at 5 yards, and
You're not pre-cutting
You'll
lanes.
hear it.
Yeah,
you're going to hear the splashing, and we had one come through. You can smell it.
you can see you'll see the frag getting knocked around. You'll see the frag tops. You'll literally be sitting there, and you'll see the grass moving, and you're trying so hard to see the animal there, and you can't see it.
You know it's there. Everything's there, and it's driving you crazy.
You can even hear it eating the grass and like pulling it through its teeth, and
Right.
like the little squeaking of the grass going through their teeth. I mean, I'm telling you, they're literally yards away from you.
Not a thing you can do.
You cannot
Until
see
they
them.
cross that little waterway or the path.
And sometimes
That's it.
they might not, or they might just jump across really quick because they don't like to be in the open. They
Right.
like to be in the cover. They like to be hidden.
They live in it.
Yeah, and that's another thing. If you try to pre-cut stuff, don't, because they're gonna avoid it. If you try to pre-cut something like that and like open a big shooting lane or something like that, they're just gonna go around it, or they're not gonna cross it during the daylight. Because I've had guys, they're like, oh, well, we'll just take clippers in there and clear out a big like shooting area around you. Go ahead, but they're not. They might come in there in the night and feed on all that stuff you cut
It's
down.
like a
but
big
they're
mature
not.
buck, man. They don't want to daylight themselves.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, and Sika deer, they can get really old too.
Does wind play a big factor in that also?
It does. I don't think it's as big of a factor as whitetails.
Well,
Because another thing about them with that, it's so thick and the stuff they're living in. A lot of times I feel like your scent just carries over them and it just stays above that frag, and they're down way in that frag. Scent is a thing. They definitely has a play. You don't want to just like intentionally hunt a spot with a bad wind.
Right.
But I definitely hunt spots that without a great wind still have success.
because the reason I ask, because you're in the water and water draws it.
Yeah.
Well, that, and anyone who's been down around there, around any swamp, that wetland has a very distinct, strong smell of its
Okay.
own.
Yeah.
So it's almost like a natural cover scent.
That low
That
tide.
too, when you're in that mud and you get it all over your waders and
it's
stuff.
natural cover.
Yeah, and I've done that too. I've even taken the mud and like wiped it all over the tree, like up where I'm sitting and stuff, as like you
Just
said,
to
a
blow it down.
natural cover scent.
That's crazy.
Yeah, but one thing I will say is the wind doesn't really affect their movement. Well, it kind of does in a sense. Like dead calm, I don't like hunting dead calm.
You got to have a wind.
Yeah, you got to have some wind because they don't like moving in the dead calm. They make so much noise. Like you said, when they're walking to the water, they splash and everything. And when it's dead calm, you can hear them from 200 yards away splashing.
Mm-hmm.
They don't like to move when it's dead calm.
Do they have some type of predators down there
I mean,
other than humans?
not really.
Like they don't have a coyote problem?
There's
or nothing?
not. There's. I just saw a post today on Facebook. There's a guy who caught a coyote down there.
Really?
Yeah, today. A beaver and a coyote today. But the coyotes are starting to come around. There's not a lot of coyotes down on the eastern shore.
Well, that's tough for them because they don't like water.
Yeah, they
Right.
can only get up on the islands and the high side and the pines, really.
Exactly.
I mean,
so-
they just don't like the water. They can go through anything they want, but they don't like being wet.
Sure, and that's the thing about the Sika deer is they might have a couple predators, but they can get away from those predators by going into the water because
Right.
the coyotes aren't going to go hunt them in the swamp.
Mm-hmm.
So that we have a lot of foxes, but a fox isn't going to get
No.
the Sika deer in. So, I mean, there's some coyotes. That's about it. I mean, humans is really the only thing that hunts them. You know.
Absolutely. Well, man, I really appreciate you joining us, but I do have one last question before you take off, man, and you
Yeah.
probably already know the answer, or at least know the question. Sean, what drives you outdoors, man?
Just the passion, love, and it's what I love doing. You know, it's what I've always done. And it's what I do best.
Just know it.
Yeah.
Just live it.
There you go.
That's awesome, bro.
Awesome. Where can everybody find you?
On Instagram, Snake Snatcher Sean. On Facebook, Sean Kirk Russell. And yeah, that's about it. Might be starting a YouTube up. Do a lot of shed hunting, so I'm thinking about starting to video some shed hunts. But
I know you got some future plans, but we won't go into those.
Yeah.
Maybe we'll do those in
We'll
a
let
future.
those-
yeah, we'll talk
let those
about that later
we'll let
on.
those melt through, but
Yeah,
just
yeah.
some good stuff coming.
Yeah, a lot of good plans
Outstanding.
coming though.
Well, it's been a pleasure having you on here, Sean, and thanks for taking the time and giving us that little bit of headway on all this Eastern Shore hunting.
Yeah, man.
Just-
Hopefully, you guys will be down there soon.
Oh, well, we certainly plan on it. More to be disclosed later. But anyways, guys, we appreciate you. Jump over, check him out, follow along, and until then, thanks for taking the ride right here on the Outdoor Drive.